You know, it's damn near impossible to wade into the online shitstorm surrounding IO's 007 First Light without feeling a profound mix of bemusement and secondhand embarrassment. These clowns have rammed the rigid, spiky dildo of anti-woke hysteria so far up their own asses, it's rattling around their fucking skulls, convinced that any deviation from their personal fanfic is a rainbow-lathered cockslap across the face, all while playing grab-ass with each other. In reality, there's actually plenty to criticize about the game, but it sure as hell isn't the tired culture war talking points they keep furiously jerking off to in denial that Gamergate 2 is over, desperate to stay relevant in a world that's already moved on without them. Let me make this crystal clear. There are two kinds of people who aren't aboard with surface level DEI. First, the basement dwelling freaks who never leave their echo chamber. Let's call them the Yorch Torches. The ones who see a little extra melanin on screen and immediately start screaming about the death of Western civilization while convinced it's giving them anal herpes. Then there's the second group. The ones who accept reality for what it is, demand strict meritocracy, point out the pandering when it's obvious, and maybe laugh at the absurdity, and then move the hell on with their lives. That's where I stand. That is where this review is going. Believe it or not, you're allowed to have nuance. We are not here to clutch pearls or chase clout. We're here to dissect the game while making fun of Yorch Torch. The name's Locust, the leering Locust, and tonight we are reviewing 007 First Light, a game that has no right being this divisive. Before we slip into the shadows and start carving up what actually matters, do yourself a favor, smash that like button unless you want to be mechanically lowered into a pool of sharks, subscribe if you still got a pulse, and ring that bell so you don't miss when the next target drops. Warning, there are going to be plot spoilers, and I think I do a pretty good job dissecting the story in a unique way, so if that bothers you, go and finish the game, and come back when you're feeling sexy enough to engage with this content. Let's start with the story. On the surface, you can see exactly why some people clock 007 First Light and immediately scream, DEI Jerk-Off Festival. Fair enough. The optics are there, if you're only skimming. But let's inject some goddamn context before the pitchforks start flying. The James Bond brand has always been a sleek, violent mascot for the British Empire. Hell, zoom in tighter, and it is practically a love letter to London itself, MI6's concrete heart. For better or worse, that Empire's ghost has had to watch the city change in ways Ian Fleming never scripted. Post-Brexit, post-mass migration, the old town got rewritten. Weekends now throb with raves instead of stiff clubbing, Dishoom-style curry houses sprout on every corner, and Sega World is long dead.
Okay, that last one was kind of niche.
Bond doesn't exist in a vacuum, he never did. 007 First Light drops us into modern Britain with a scrappy, unrefined James Bond who basically stumbled ass first into MI6 while they are rebooting the whole 00 program from the ground up. The Bond series has always played it loose with time. Decades roll by, Bond keeps looking like $1 million, and the franchise just winks at the audience with, "Dog, don't think about it, just roll with it." This game honors that tradition beautifully. It starts from scratch, no convoluted continuity gymnastics, no baggage from Connery, Craig, or anyone else. Fresh origin, fresh blood, clean slate. Naturally, 007 First Light leans hard into modern day London, the real one. Not the postcard fantasy. You'll chase leads through killer drum and bass night in a club whose architecture and layout just screams fabric. You know, that legendary London Temple of Bass. While MI6 itself runs with a terminal case of diversity hires. Moneypenny's a few shades darker, M is now a proper curry slayer, and your best white mate from the 00 program gets iced within the first act, and his girlfriend, also 00 material, ticks the next box by rolling up in a wheelchair shortly after. Look, hear me out. If the CIA is not safe from this institutional hysteria, what the hell makes you think the UK, the country that'll send police to your door for a mean tweet towards protected classes, was ever going to let MI6 get a free pass? But guess what? That all boils down to plot. And if you've been following this channel for a bit, our mantra is that plot is a clever way to get the characters from point A to point B. So let's talk about what really matters. The characters. You know, I've always seen James Bond as an analog clock ticking away in a digital world. No matter how much the environment shifts and mutates around him, the politics, the cities, the faces in the room, he's still that cold, charming bastard. The one unks, like me, have loved for decades. Suave, lethal, unapologetic. A relic that somehow never feels outdated even when the chips are down. I actually adore James Bond's story arc in 007 First Light. And yeah, maybe it hits harder because I see a lot of myself in it. Remember, this story kicks off in a world where nobody at MI6 has the slightest clue who James Bond is. To his superiors, he's just another cocky, reckless idiot. A loose cannon who cannot follow orders if they were burned into his retinas. This is an agency built on unforgiving compliance. Any deviation, any color outside the lines is treated like an existential threat. But Bond has always been the exception. Deeply instinctive. Form follows function, and the only function that matters is the mission. Sleeping with the hottest women on the planet. Teresa Lorca is my new Western Dev creative waifu, by the way. Stealing whatever he needs. And yes, extinguishing someone's light permanently. It's all just tools in the kit. Means to the only end that counts. Getting the job done. From life experience, I know exactly how this plays out. When people such as myself, the ones who thrive by breaking the rules while compliance blows up in their face, walk into the room, nobody feels safe. Doesn't matter how clean the results are, how many times you explain the logic, or how well you articulate the play. You are still a liability. Always will be. Trust and respect stay permanently off the table. Scale that up to MI6, where the stakes aren't just your career or your ego, they're the country. Maybe the whole goddamn world. An agency built on surgical precision. In that machine, a loose cannon isn't merely annoying, he is a potential apocalypse wearing a tuxedo. Now, this is where the story actually gets brilliant. The whole thing orbits around THEIA, a quantum AI cooked up by Sir Nicholas Webb, who, side note, feels a little too on the nose as an in-game Elon Musk stand-in. Look, I am fine with Bond stories roasting billionaires, but at least in Tomorrow Never Dies, you had to connect some dots to see Elliot Carver as a Rupert Murdoch / William Hurt stand-in. Here, they basically just slapped a turtleneck on the guy and called it a day. Anyways, THEIA has been embedded into the highest levels of government, including MI6, as this all-seeing oracle meant to predict crisis, Minority Report style, so they can stop perpetrators and crisis before they even happen. Except in reality, THEIA is dogshit, wildly inaccurate, hallucinating what they call ghost patterns, and spitting out predictions that would have gotten the whole project scrapped. Webb and his son Damien don't fix it, they fix reality. Whenever THEIA messes up, they deploy mercenaries, stage terrorist attacks, plant evidence, frame people, eliminate witnesses, and rewrite crime scenes so MI6's ops still look flawless on paper. The machine stays godlike, the illusion holds, and that is the stroke of genius. Bond is the ultimate chaotic human. Unpredictable, scrappy, instinctive, fallible as hell, sleeping around, breaking every rule, winging it, yet still delivering results. He is the outsider, the renegade, the higher-ups will never fully trust. Meanwhile, Webb and THEIA are the polished institutional relics, fabricating outcomes, hiding systemic failure, yet they are given unlimited respect and power by the British government. This is where the story transcends spy thriller. It is a brutal meditation on human fallibility versus technological fallibility, and which one actually costs more when the stakes are this high. That's where Webb becomes far more interesting than the game initially lets on. The real danger isn't that THEIA is wrong, the real danger is people desperately want it to be right. Bond is chaos incarnate, instinctive, reckless, impossible to predict. He's the kind of man who can save the world before breakfast and trigger an international incident before lunch. Nobody feels comfortable putting their faith in a guy like that, even when he consistently delivers results. Webb, on the other hand, offers something infinitely more seductive. Certainty. Not truth, not competence, certainty. That's why the British government keeps feeding THEIA power even after the machine starts hallucinating ghost patterns and shitting the bed on a regular basis, because uncertainty terrifies institutions. Human judgment is messy. Instinct cannot be graphed. Experience cannot be quantified. Bond's success looks like luck to people who live and die by spreadsheets. There's an old joke that goes, "The operation was a complete disaster, but the spreadsheet looked fantastic." That is basically Webb in a nutshell. He sells a world where every variable can be measured, every threat predicted, every outcome controlled. A world where the chaos of human beings can finally be reduced to data points. The irony is that THEIA only works because Webb is constantly committing crimes to protect its reputation. Every time the machine gets something wrong, reality itself has to be bent until the prediction appears correct. Terror attacks are staged, evidence is planted, and witnesses disappear. The system becomes so obsessed with proving itself accurate that the accuracy stops mattering altogether. Honestly, that is one of the smartest ideas in the entire game. Webb isn't really selling artificial intelligence, he's selling the comforting illusion that uncertainty can be eliminated. Bond spends the entire story proving the opposite, that human beings are chaotic, irrational, and unpredictable, and sometimes that is exactly what saves the day. Another favorite chew toy for the Yorch torches was the fact that Bond spends a decent chunk of the game getting orders and being talked down to by women higher up on the MI6 food chain. Kind of like every Bond movie ever made, but let's pretend that their outrage has a point for like 2 seconds. A huge part of this story is Bond carving out his own chaotic niche inside the agency. Have these people never held a real job? Bureaucrats above you, bureaucrats. Especially the ones who've never tasted dirt, and Cordite will talk down to you like you're a disobedient dog. And honestly, what better setup for classic 007 Defiance than getting bitched at by some desk jockey who's never seen real combat? By the end of the game, he earns their trust anyway. Through it all, Bond stays the same unrepentant, charming misogynist we've loved, or loved to hate, for decades, depending on how much nuance you allow into your life. He's either the last base bastard standing or the ultimate problematic fantasy. You know, side note, off the script, like, dude, how funny is it that his story arc is growing into the misogynist that we all love? Like, how hilarious is that? That is like the most base story arc I've probably heard in my whole fucking life. At his core, Bond is a lone wolf. If you've ever worn that skin yourself, you already know the curse. The universe does more than isolate you. It actively conspires to rip away anyone who gets too close. Friends, lovers, partners, they end up dead, broken, or burned because proximity to you is fucking hazardous. One mission, one bad call, one moment of weakness, and the bill comes due in blood. You either carry the survivor's guilt like a second shadow, every face that trusted you now rotting in the ground, or you categorize that part of yourself completely, become colder, sharper, more lethal, more isolated as a result. A charming bastard on the surface, but underneath, there's nothing but ice and purpose. That is the real 007 tragedy this game nails without ever sliding into therapy hour. Bond isn't merely defying orders because he's a rebel, he's alone because the job, the world, and his own nature demand it. Everyone who tries to stand beside him eventually becomes another ghost in the rearview mirror. You see it right here in the apartment, a note on the wall that reads something along the lines of, "Be likable, not memorable." And that single line says everything, because to get genuinely close to someone, to really know them, you have to be memorable. You have to let them see the soul underneath the tuxedo. Their favorite cereal, the music that lights up their eyes, the quiet tragedies that make them human. All the little details that create connection. Bond cannot afford any of that. Likeable keeps the mask intact. Memorable gets people killed. IO Interactive clearly understood the assignment. They nailed exactly what makes James Bond an icon. The storytelling in 007 First Light is easily the highest point of the entire game. Tight, personal, thematically brutal, and soaked in that classic 007 melancholy beneath the swagger. The voice acting is stellar across the board. Every single character sells the gravitas a Bond story demands. The cast locked in, delivering weight, tension, and quiet tragedy without a single weak link, except Lenny Kravitz. What the hell is an African warlord from the kingdom of Aleph in, is it Mauritania, doing with that smooth California accent? Bawama is supposed to be a ruthless pirate ruler who clawed his way up from nothing in the Sahara, yet every time he opens his mouth, it sounds like he just stepped out of a skate park in Venice Beach. It's the one jarring note in an otherwise flawless ensemble. I mean, he did look cool though. Now the music. Good lord, the music in 007 First Light is absolutely fantastic. What else would you expect from a Bond project? This franchise has been serving iconic theme songs for decades. I've never been a huge fan of the last few movie intros, and my personal gold standard is still Tomorrow Never Dies. But Lana Del Rey, I've never been a big fan until now. They knocked this one clean out of the goddamn ballpark. The mixing is pristine, almost uncanny, and this one wicked bass line that comes to the forefront of the track, ooh baby, dark, sultry, dangerous, pure 007. Easily one of the biggest highlights in the entire game. Okay, so after all that praise, you're probably waiting for the other shoe to drop. Here it is. The gameplay in 007 First Light, let's just say it's not perfect. Not even close. If you've been following the hype, you've heard the pitch. It's a slick mix of Hitman sandbox stealth and Uncharted cinematic action. I've never touched Hitman games, so I can't speak on that half, but I've platinumed 2 Uncharted titles and spent over 1,000 hours with Helldivers 2. Third-person shooters have always been my bread and butter, up there with Devil May Cry and Ninja Gaiden. I know what good gunplay and fluid movement feel like. What I kept detecting throughout 007 First Light is a lack of real confidence in its own identity. It never fully commits to what a James Bond game should feel like. The Hitman-style sections are clearly meant to be the yin, cool, calculated intrigue, deception, silent neutralizations, eavesdropping, espionage at its sneakiest. The Uncharted-inspired sequences are supposed to unleash the yang, raw, explosive chaos, Bond charging through storms of bullets and waves of enemies like the ultimate blunt instrument. On spreadsheets, perfect duality. The operation, the game constantly second guesses itself. The stealth is decent, but never reaches what I would imagine is that systemic Hitman level depth. The action is flashy and cinematic, yet it lacks weight and fluidity and the satisfying feedback of great third-person shooters. As someone fresh to the Hitman side, my biggest gripe with the yin segments is they never felt truly pressing. No real timers, no razor-tight consequences, no tension that forces split-second decisions. They just drag enough to kill the momentum. Keep in mind, part of what makes Bond is staring down life or death chaos and turning it with pure instinct. We barely get any of that. There were so many times that I was fully torqued, trigger finger itching, only to get yanked into LARPing as an art nerd at a museum. I did appreciate that these segments are treated like proper puzzles though. Meanwhile, the run and gun yang sections felt criminally short. You're never given enough breathing room to truly master the shooting mechanics until the very end of the game, once the stealth sections finally go home to mommy. I hit the final act and literally thought, man, I wish the whole game felt like this. All that to say, the pacing leaves a lot to be desired. To make things even worse, even after a half-an-hour tutorial that should have covered everything, the controls during the shootouts never fully felt intuitive. I didn't truly get a grip on them until the credits were rolling. The CQC segments had some genuinely cool ideas, especially the grapple mechanic, which is fantastic for controlling space and turning fights in your favor, but good lord, they need way more refinement. The yellow flash for blocks is confusing as hell, and for most of the game, I couldn't figure out if I was supposed to react to the instant it popped or wait until the punch was kissing my face to parry. The game does a piss poor job in teaching it, so you spend the early and middle sections eating unnecessary combos while you figure out the janky rhythm. Now I will say this, I really appreciated the gadgets in 007 First Light. They let you tackle one scenario a million different ways with a million different outcomes, each one more cinematic and satisfying than the last. Whether you're going full Silent Predator or turning the whole place into a chaotic fireworks show, the toys deliver. And that same beautiful variety bleeds straight into the yin sections too, giving you freedom to improvise, experiment, and feel like an actual 00 agent instead of just following a checklist. But dude, The level design, absolute fire. The scenario writers deserve a fat raise. The climax and final fight were so unapologetically Bond in the best possible way, pure cinematic insanity that the series has always thrived on. The real issue with 007 First Light is that it's a game of very high highs and painfully mid lows. And the biggest casualty is the gameplay itself. There were so many moments where I was just trudging down empty hallways thinking, why the hell isn't this a cutscene? It would have kept the momentum rolling instead of grinding it to a halt. At times, the game stops feeling like an interactive movie and starts feeling like an interactive novel. All tell, very little exhilarating do, and that is the tragedy. The storytelling has moments that genuinely transcend typical video game nonsense, but they're constantly undercut because the gameplay doesn't support them. In a great orchestra, every instrument is supposed to amplify the others at the right moment. Here, too many sections feel like a solo performance, disjointed, out of sync, and far less powerful than they should have been. But there is still something very special here. Overall, I'm giving 007 First Light a solid 007 feast out of 0010 famines. Thanks for sticking around through the review. If you like your Bond cold, your reviews honest, and your opinions free of evangelized Yorch torch brain rot, smash the like, sub up, and ring that bell. It actually helps. And also, I got the platinum for the game, but I don't really feel like doing a platinum video for it. If you would want that, just let me know in the comments. Now, if you will excuse me, I've got a martini to shake, not stir, and I'll see you in the field, agents.